Welcome Internet. Today we're going to be talking about the phenomenology of burnout through a Binswangerian lens. Now, what does that mean in layman's terms? Well, very simply, we're going to talk about burnout not from the perspective of it just being a mental illness or overworkness, but as how it pertains and affects the individual in their subjectivity, i.e., how it changes their relationship with themselves, the world, and others. So to do that, we're going to investigate multiple axioms, namely time and space, and of course the relationship between interpersonal relationships between the individuals. So let's start with time. Time in burnout is very interesting because it's both absent, because often people that suffer burnout don't feel that they have enough time, so they feel that everything is under pressure constantly, and yet it's an eternal present. So what does that mean? That means that there is a contradiction in what I'm saying, but the contradiction is necessary, at least for now, because they experience subjectively their lives as being always under pressure, always having to do something, always having to go forward in life. However, they're also stuck, because what is happening is that they're taken into the movement of an eternal present. Because what is happening is that their time is diminishing. It's not diminishing to open up to a future or to look back at the past. It's diminishing because their feeling of agency is dissipating. Why is it dissipating? Well, basically, fundamentally, because of the workload, because of the fact that they can't make a difference, what is happening is that they are over-investing into their work, which means that they give themselves less and less time to be, time to relax, time to enjoy. And they give themselves more and more work. That work itself is an eternal repetition, because the more they do, the further they feel that they can get. But still, because of the mechanisms behind burnout, the further they do, the more they stay at the same point. It's a bit like if they were running and the scenery never changes. It's a bit as if they were seeing the objective on a postcard but never been able to go to the location of the postcard, all while at the same time thinking to themselves that they can achieve it. So it also entangles the ideal, because the ideal is to reach that point, and yet they're stuck. They're in an eternal cycle of repetition, a repetition that they might not see, a repetition that steals their time and their efforts into an everlasting now, a now that gives no room for the past, because the past in itself is not present and it doesn't fulfill a purpose, and no, how can I say, place for the future, as the future is never now. It is always in a long time. And nothing that is done can achieve the future, meaning that their potential is denied in burnout. The being of the person is limited to what they are now, meaning that in a very important way, they are losing themselves to the workload. They are losing themselves, who they are. Their being is being replaced by what they feel the work demands, that the work imposes. So therefore they're stuck, can't rely on the past, and can't dream the future, and cannot make that future happen because of the systemic issues. Now that we have explored the fact that they are blocked to a level of eternal present, what is happening is that to break free, at least mentally, they're going to overinvest their work. They're going to sacrifice a part of themselves to engage with work. These people at the beginning, will do what isn't called trivialized, called burn-in, i.e. they're going to overly invest. They're going to say, I'm going to beat this, right? But I'm going to beat this by breaking the whole wheel. However, what is terrible is that this illusion is going to hurt them because they're going to overly invest. And what's going to happen is not that they're going to triumph, is that the work is going to crush them, and it's going to crush who they are and replace it by what the work is expecting of them. A crushing that is not necessarily really realized, because the person is going to always push, i.e. they're going to be stuck in an eternal movement. They're going to move like on a spinning wheel, move and move and move, hoping, daydreaming that if they move fast enough, long enough, everything will break free, that they will break free from the wheel, that the wheel in of itself is merely just an obstacle, when in fact it's the whole system. It's not just like something that's a barrier. It's the whole design, and that is something that often people don't realize. So they're stuck in an eternal present, in an eternal movement of always doing the same. And what starts to happen often is the body starts to show signals that, for example, they start becoming overly sick, they start to have migraines, they be irritable, they can't sleep. All of this is the body's trying to prevent the movement from continuing, trying to prevent something from going on and on and on. We can also see this in digestive symptoms like diarrhea, for example, or constipation. That in one way, in constipation, the bowel movement is stopped, and in diarrhea, the bowel movement is completely expelled. And we can see this from a phenomenological perspective as problems with bodily movement, as the movement itself doesn't inscribe itself in a purpose, because the meaning of the work has dissipated, because there is no future. Therefore, there is no meaning, as the meaning of now is limited, as Heidegger points out in Being and Time. And of course, I should talk about the body, but the body is the first sign of this eternal movement that's going astray, that it's leading to nowhere. It's just leading back to where it started, like an Ouroboros, in a way. And of course, when I'm saying that about the body, I want to be very clear. This is a phenomenological perspective, right? It's not a biological perspective. And both can be true. One can have issues and fall sick more often when one is under pressure, because the mental state is that of survival and of trying to move forward regardless. And all of these mental processes ask a lot of the body. But there's also the mind. The mind is also comes at a cost, as lack of focus, memory losses, mistakes that should not have been made or are not often made are also done in burnout, because what is happening is the mind, after the body collapses, the mind tries to keep on. It tries to keep this illusion of eternal movement going, but it doesn't work. And at some point, the movement just stops. And I was going to say the moment, but that's it. The moment just stops. Because, for example, there's often moments in which people realize that they can no longer continue in that direction, that they are destroying themselves. For example, some people might go to work, and once they start putting the keys into the contact of the car, they realize that it can't continue. When people, for example, sometimes go for a walk, realizing that the movement it cannot continue, the realization comes at a point where it stops the movement from occurring. It stops the cycle from repeating. What it does at that moment where there is this fundamental recognition is that it creates an alternative, a new path in which the person can finally break free from the movement. Not that they have broken the system of the burnout, be it through the company or the institution and so on and so forth. What they have done is they've stepped down from the wheel, they've stepped down from the treadmill, they've stepped down from this eternal repetition, they've taken a step back. And in doing so, what they're doing for themselves is that they're reinscribing themselves into what was and what will. Meaning that when they take a step back, there's a final realization that I wasn't always like this. I didn't used to be so tired. I didn't used to think only about work. I did have friends, I did have family. So they re-enrolling themselves into their past. And doing so also opens up the future and the potentials of it can be different. I'm not condemned to experience this all the time. And that fundamental thought is what breaks the eternal present. Because the eternal present cannot survive when both past and future are rekindled. Because what is happening at that point is that the present becomes, how can I say, no longer isolated from both, but connected. And that's what the present is. It's a connection between our past and our future. Something that burnout cuts out, that our present is just what it is, an eternal present, an everlasting now. But this is an illusion, as the present isn't that, and burnout isn't eternal. And what happens afterwards is very specific on the person, but fundamentally that change is a change for a better life, for something better, for a movement that's no longer a caricature, but a true spontaneous movement, that we go where we go at our pace, but we go there. It's not we feel that we go and we stay stuck and we run a marathon, and that marathon was only on the treadmill or in a wheel. No, we go where we go at our pace and with our abilities, and we achieve things. And the fact of not achieving in burnout is something that, in a way, makes the person go into a spiral in which they feel that they are at fault, when in fact it's the whole problem of the system. The system has given them the illusion that they could go beyond, that they could break it. But it's like any illusion. There's a point where we see through it. And I mean, we collectively, humans, see through, and the people who suffer from burnout understand at their very core that the only way to get themselves back, to renounce sacrificing themselves, is to leave, is to change their perspectives. As burnout has changed their perspective, they're changing it back, not necessarily to what was before, but something different, something perhaps more true to who they are, because in all of this they can't express their being, because their being is being completely pressed, crushed by the lack of time, by the fact that they have to do stuff. But now, when they are free from it, they can finally see themselves for who they are and retake possessions of their lives in a truer and more profound way than before. So this was a Binswangerian take on burnout, because often we don't talk about it like that. I hope you enjoyed it. I know that I love doing these types of videos, but I don't know if they're too abstract or not, but I found them interesting. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.